Hello everybody, and today I wanted to talk about survivability in War Thunder Naval and what you can do during your matches or even before the match when you're modifying your ship in order to increase your survivability and the length of time you're going to actually exist in the match in order to continue putting out more damage and earn more EXP on the ships that you actually want to grind versus whatever else is in your lineup or the close air support that you're randomly calling in. Before I get into what can actually help out, I want to point out that the background gameplay in this video is me putting into effect most of what I'm talking about here with a very stock USS Portland and a spaded USS Atlanta, though I will warn everybody that I'm not quite a fan of Portland's guns yet, so please don't pay too much attention to the aim. But regardless, getting into it, the first thing I'd like to talk about is the crew skills and what you should prioritize when you're actually putting these points down. Before anything else, I want to specify that your points that you are earning do overlap if you're trying to do air, ground, or naval all at once on the same nation. So if you're earning points overall, they're all going to the same bank, and when you spend them, it does not transfer over to the other lines. So just pay attention when you're actually spending them, because if you wanted to up your naval skills and you're researching planes at the same time, if you put skills in for your planes crew, it's going to take away from the points that you earned via naval battles. But getting into it, the first skill that you should prioritize is crew interchangeability. This is found on the commander's skill page, and it increases the amount of crew members you can lose before you end up sinking automatically due to the lack of crew members. It's basically, if you want to think about it this way, it's an overall ship health point buff. So you'll be able to take a lot more hits over time that are just nicking away your crew members, and it'll give you just that little bit extra that you can survive throughout the match. The next skill that I want to talk about that is also on the commander skill page is leadership. Maxed out, this is a flat 5% buff to all your other skills, and even though that doesn't sound like a whole lot, it's to every skill on the ship's crew, I do believe. So it's very useful even if you haven't gotten to the other skills yet, as it will affect your damage control, maneuverability, and main battery reloads all in one go, and it'll buff all of them as you work it up. So in my opinion, it's quite important. And the last skill that I think everybody should prioritize is fire extinguishing. This is found under your damage control tab in the crew skills, and obviously putting out fires first is always your best bet, especially when it's in your magazines, as those, if they're given enough time, will just straight up detonate your ship and you'll find yourself at the bottom of the ocean. So definitely look towards getting this one if fires are a problem, and if they aren't, get the crew skills first for the increased crew members, and then look towards this fire extinguishing one just to help you later on. Moving on from crew skills, I want to talk about the modifications on your ship. So as you go through, there's 4 tiers to your modifications, and you only have to take a few to unlock the next tier, but as you're selecting your next tier, it's very important to get the right ones rather than what you think might be useful and find that you're dying faster in the matches. So if you wanted to focus on your survivability, obviously for tier 1 you're looking at damage control. This is the default research when you're buying a new ship. It's always going to default to researching this first, and it just helps you complete your repairs slightly faster. So overall, very helpful modification. I'd definitely stay with getting it first. But as soon as you get that done, tier 2 will unlock, and then you start having choices. So next up, I'd say fire division or rudder replacement are both super helpful modifications at tier 2. It really depends on your playstyle. If you're staying way out at long range, that extra maneuverability might be to your advantage, so you might take that rudder modification first. But if in any case, whether you're playing close up or long range, you're definitely going to want that fire division to help shave a couple seconds off the time it takes to put out fires on your ships. So Both are pretty good in my opinion, but I think Fire Division actually takes the cake on this one as being the better modification for Tier 2, at least the one you should get first. Moving on to Tier 3 modifications, I'd definitely say Shrapnel Protection is going to be your first one, as it's going to prevent your crews from dying as much just due to shrapnel from rounds hitting you. And that should be followed up by Ventilation to help your crew live a little bit longer in case of fires. So both of those are just helping your crews live a little bit longer on your ship and keep you from running out of crew members faster than you had originally anticipated. Moving on to the Tier 4 modifications, it is without contest that you should get Ammo Wetting first. This is basically to reduce your detonation chances if a round happens to find its way to your magazine, and there's no contest that this should be the first thing you research, as not everybody tends to like getting detonated unless you really hate the ship that you're playing, and obviously you can't grind if you're at the bottom of the ocean. So definitely get this one first, and then as you move on from that one, you have a choice between pumps for extra water removal or engine upgrades for more maneuverability, and both are easy choices depending on your playstyle. If you're more for the maneuvering to avoid damage, I'd definitely go with that one, but if you're taking a lot of armor piercing hits or torpedoes or stuff like that, definitely go for the pumps just to help you recover from that damage a little bit faster. The last thing I want to say per modifications is don't take unnecessary munitions. These would be things like depth charges, mines, very poor torpedoes on some cruisers and battleships. These are just adding to your chances of being detonated, and in the case of depth charges and stuff like that, they're really doing nothing for you. And the same goes for mines. If you're not going to lay them, just don't take them, because you're just adding explosives to your ship for the enemy to hit. I'd like to also throw in here that reducing your overall ammunition count for your main and secondary batteries may also help you stop detonating as much, but the jury's kind of out on that one, and it's really hard to actually confirm nor deny that one, as your shell fire is kind of all over in this game. And it's hard to get a specific hit to repeatedly test this out. Moving on from the modifications categories and into gameplay, first things first, I'd like to talk about damage control. Early on, War Thunder does a terrible job of teaching everybody how this works, and if you're coming from another game like World of Warships, where you could basically just hit all the buttons at once and let it go, it's going to absolutely suck for you. The biggest tip I have for your damage control cooldowns is to not use them all at the same time. When you do use more than one at once, say you use two, it will double the time of both those repairs, and if you use three, it'll triple it. So definitely don't just face roll these unless it's a very specific situation where you absolutely have to prevent your ship from sinking, or say one of them is a very short cooldown, as overall it's going to add up to a massive timer for you just to do a simple repair. And the other thing I want to say about this is don't repair unnecessary damage during fights or right before you fire your guns, as any damage control actions will debuff the times that your ship takes per other actions, such as reloading or measuring distance, and it can easily turn something like a 30-second reload on battleship guns into a 45-second reload with just one damage control ability active at the time. So definitely pay attention to this. I think War Thunder did an absolutely terrible job of teaching new players this when they first start out, and I think it definitely detriments players early on when they look down and suddenly have a 120-second cooldown and their ship slowly tipping over. As per other things you should know about your damage control, if your bridge gets destroyed, it will automatically trigger a repair, and you will also lose control of your ship's maneuvering. So if you're doing another repair at the same time while your bridge is suddenly getting damaged and needing to repair on its own, I would definitely consider holding down whatever damage control key that you were doing previously canceling that damage control and letting your bridge repair, as losing steering on your ship is kind of a pain and may just lead you to hitting an island or not being able to maneuver to avoid enemy fire. As per what you should prioritize for actually using your damage control, I would say fires are probably your first priority, as especially if they're in your guns or magazines, it's just going to straight up detonate your ship. A fire in your conning tower probably won't detonate you, but it's definitely going to reduce your crew significantly. So I would definitely put that out first. My second priority I would say would be flooding, as the flooding can quickly stack up if you just leave it there, and it will slowly increase the amount of water coming into your ship, and it'll take longer to both patch those leaks and pump the water out. All the water in your ship can also affect your ship's maneuverability negatively and cause listing, and too much of it will just cause you to sink. It'll trigger the automatic abandoned ship timer, and after a certain amount of time, even if you're already starting to pump the water out and recovering, if it's still beyond the point of no return according to the game, it will just cause you to sink. And the last one that I want to say would be the actual damage repair. So for this one, I'd say pay attention to the bottom left of your screen and see what is actually damaged. It could just be a catapult or a little piece of armor on your ship. And sometimes these things are pretty unnecessary to you at the time if you're, mid-brawl with an enemy ship. So these can wait until the fight is over or until you get a spare second between their salvos or your salvos to actually repair it. Keep an eye on these though, as very similarly to flooding, they will stack up and cause a longer repair time overall when you do lose a critical component. So it'll take longer to fully repair your ship versus having that out of the way and only repairing that critical component. Continuing on from that, I would like to talk about movement during the match with your ship. One of the best ways to avoid damage in War Thunder is just steering and changing your speed. You'll see a lot of players just sail around in a straight line, firing on whatever target they picked, and it makes them a significantly easier target than somebody that is actively changing their speed and shifting where their heading actually is. Even slowing down at long range can prevent people from even landing a shot on you, as they could be aiming way ahead of your ship and suddenly you just stopped, so they'll overshoot. This is especially important against good players that are aiming specifically for your magazines or turrets, because making them miss is basically life or death for you, as if they do manage to land that shot or land it multiple times, you're just going to detonate. So slowing down and maneuvering to throw off their aim is basically key to stopping them from killing you. Another thing to note about enemy players is that you have to remember that many players just aim for that green circle that the game gives you when it measures the distance to your ship, and nothing else. They don't pay attention to what your ship's actually doing or any changes to your positioning as you try to get away from them or advance towards them. So you can use this to your advantage when you're maneuvering, and you should leave a little bit of time for the circle to update on their end if you can kinda estimate how long it's taking them to update their aim. And before you make your sudden change in maneuver, let their circle update so that it's not showing them that your ship is actually moving to avoid their shells, or updating to your new course and causing you to get hit anyway. So definitely pay attention to that. You can also use this to force players to hit specific parts of your ship. Say you have a mid-mounted turret, and so you have a magazine right under it, and you know that that green circle is aiming right for the center of your ship, and if somebody's targeting right for the center of your ship, they're going to hit that magazine eventually. So what you can do is slightly slow down every time they fire their salvo, and they'll probably hit a little bit further up on your ship, and therefore not hitting your magazine and getting an lucky detonation on you, even though they weren't specifically aiming for it. Most players, if you do start to maneuver and make them miss a lot, will just stop firing at you. They'll pick an easier target, they'll pick somebody closer, just because they cannot, for the life of them, hit your ship or at least damage it significantly. You can also double up on this by dropping smoke while you're turning or moving away from enemy ships to hide your hull so that they can't see that you're actually maneuvering outside of the little green circle. And after a little while with the smoke behind you blocking their view, they also won't be able to target you and will stop getting updates to that green circle until you come out of your smoke, which usually by then they've switched to a different target. And the last thing I want to mention for maneuvering is slowing down or stopping your ship can actually slow down flooding depending on where you're actually being flooded from or where you took the hit. So use that to your advantage if you do end up taking a torpedo in your bow and don't want to suddenly flood out before your damage control can catch up with it. So last but certainly not least, I would like to talk about target priorities and aiming during your match. Let's say you're in a match, you're already firing at an enemy ship, there's no chance they're going down anytime soon in your next, say, 2 or 3 salvos, but suddenly you come under fire from another enemy ship. In my opinion, you should immediately switch your fire to the enemy ship that is shooting at you, as that has now become your biggest threat, and preventing them from doing damage to you should become your priority, whether it's just forcing them to back off or actually taking out their guns. Unless the ship you were targeting beforehand can be finished off in the next salvo, I think you should definitely prioritize the ship that is starting to shell you, as they can't damage you if they're sunk or don't have any main guns. So when you're actually fighting this enemy ship that is shooting at you, you should aim for things that will deny them or at least delay their return fire. I've already mentioned that shooting the bridge causes an automatic repair. Setting stuff on fire forces people to put out the fire immediately, and many people just panic repair in the first place and slow down their reload. So you definitely want to shoot at things that are either going to start that repair, force them to put out the fire, or on the flip side, start damaging their guns, their barbettes, their reload systems, anything that will actually take their guns out of the fight and slow down their fire. Outside of when you're actually fighting another ship that's shooting at you, when you're selecting your first target, you should prioritize closer and easier targets, obviously, as they're going to contribute to your damage numbers and are quite a bit easier to aim at in the case of being closer. But you can also focus the closest threat to your ship, ergo an actual player over a bot, or a faster firing destroyer over something like a Japanese one whose main threat is torpedoes, or say a larger ship with superior firepower. Sometimes that first strike that you get in is the deciding factor of the engagement, especially if you actually aim for their magazines and cripple them significantly, or just take out their guns in the first place, preventing them from being able to do any damage. And possibly as soon as you start shooting at somebody like that, quite a bit of your team will dogpile on and start shooting that on them as well, as they see them as a weaker or easier kill. So I would definitely start thinking about what priority you want to shoot at in an engagement versus, shooting at the closest bot ship that charged into the battle. Anyways, guys, I hope this one helped somebody in the slightest bit as per how to stay alive a little bit longer. I'd be curious to see if you guys can think of anything else and mention it in the comments, because usually you guys do come up with something that I did forget. But good luck out there, everybody, and I will see you in the next one.